friends, how are you doing today? My name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch. Today I am sharing with you guys the books that I have read. So I've read a lot of really awesome books in this little break and some time before. Two that are probably going to be in my favorites of all time category, so that's really cool. And yeah, I just really enjoyed what I read. I got to listen to quite a few audiobooks as well, which was awesome, so let's just hop on in. The first book that I listened to was Brain on Fire, My Month of Madness, and this is by Susanna Cahalan. This is Cahalan's memoir about kind of what it says in the title, her month of madness. And so this is about Susanna and dealing with the medical system, dealing with the mental health system, and it's kind of like a medical mystery diagnosis story. And we start out the story with Susanna, who is young, living in New York, recent college graduate. She kind of has a job that she loves. She has boyfriends, friends, family. Just, it kind of sounds like she's living her dream from the start of the story. And so she's very happy and comfortable where she is in her life. And she wakes up and she sees that there are 2 bug bites on her arm. And there's a big scare in New York around this time about bed bugs, and so she kind of becomes obsessed with these bites and just can't get over them, why they're there. And this kind of spirals, and we follow Susanna as she continues to struggle with personality change, with being very suspicious of everyone who is around her. She starts to have seizures, and so there's just a lot going on with her. And she starts to go to doctors to tell her symptoms and to hopefully get some answers to what's going on with her. And so that's kind of how the story starts out, and then we follow her throughout her month, where a big chunk of time she doesn't remember at all what happened, and we follow her and her family as they are trying to search out proper care and a proper diagnosis for what Susanna's going through. This is a lot of people's favorite nonfiction, or just I hear a lot of people speak very highly about this book, and I completely understand why. It was really interesting to follow her story, but I will say there were just so many questions in my mind going on while I was listening, and questions that I wanted answered, like, what is someone's story that maybe wasn't in a position of privilege, didn't have family, didn't have resources, didn't have access to medical care? What would their story look like if this happened to them? It also made me question a lot about mental health hospitals and what those look like for people in different economic classes. And so just a lot of questions about the mental health system, about diagnosis of mental health diseases, and just all of those types of questions. And so I felt like this book kind of gave me an itch and didn't scratch it, if that makes sense, which is great. Those are really important questions, and I find this to be the case a lot with memoirs. They really make me question and examine and want to know lots of different things, but then I don't always feel very satisfied with the story because it doesn't give me those answers. So that's not to say that Susanna's story isn't important, that it doesn't deserve to be told, because I totally think that it does. She shed a huge light on her illness, which I don't want to say what it is because that's kind of part of the story, like the medical mystery aspect of it. But yeah, I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to. So still really important if you enjoy medical mysteries, especially if you have more of a science or medical background. I think that you would appreciate this story a lot more than maybe I did. But yeah, so it's still a good book. I liked the audio, and I think that if the story sounds interesting to you, you should definitely check it out. Next book that I read was Homegoing by Youre, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I read this with Marissa over at Blatantly Bookish, and then another lovely friend that I've met through BookTube, and it was so fun to hear their thoughts and their opinions, and it was just a really fun experience. But I loved this. I loved this so much. This follows 2 sisters, I guess 2 half-sisters, and it's set on the Gold Coast in Africa. And the first sister we follow is married off to a slave trader and stays in this area in Africa, and then the other sister is sold into the slave trade and goes to America. And so each sister gets their own chapter, and then the preceding chapters follow one of their descendants, kind of every other. And so we have this very broad story following lots of people who were affected by these two sisters and what happened to them. I just loved how Youre gives you such wonderful perspective of what was going on. She doesn't just give you pieces. I really felt like she gave me the whole thing and it was just glorious to read about. It opened my eyes to so much more, to like the long-term effects of slavery, not just in America, but you know, in other places, and particularly looking at the Gold Coast here. It was great. And each character only gets about 20 to 40 pages. They only get a chapter, but you really feel connected to the story and to the family, because it's such a generational story. So you get so connected to the line of these people, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It is getting so much FaceTime and so much hype, but it is well deserved. I think that if you love historical fiction, if you love multi-generational stories, if you like connected short story collections, or really if you are just a person in this world, that you should read this book. Definitely a new favorite, and definitely one I will be shoving on many a person in my life. So loved this, and I cannot wait to read what else Youre puts out. This was a debut novel, guys, and it's just glorious. So pick it up, read it, enjoy it.
It's just so good.
Next book I listened to was Stiff by Mary Roach. This is all about human cadavers in all of their forms, and all of the different ways they've been used throughout history. Each chapter follows kind of a different part of cadavers. So we see like cadavers in like a medical lab setting. We see cadavers that are being studied to help further forensic science. We see cadavers and kind of their evolution throughout history, and we also even talk about how we dispose of dead bodies through burial, through cremation, and then also kind of like the future. So it is very tongue-in-cheek humor that's kind of Mary Roach's style. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I thought that the narrator had a perfect voice for this book. There was just something very soothing about it, but just a little different. And I just thought for the story it worked. I will say Mary Roach's humor at the end kind of got to be like, okay, but I just love her sentiments on how cadavers are such a unique thing, because they were people, and that they have a very unique opportunity to help people because they don't feel pain, they don't know what's going on, there's not a consciousness. So it's just, the way she talks about cadavers is just so cool, and it really made me appreciate anyone who's donated their body to science. I will say there were some chapters that I didn't enjoy as much, just they didn't interest me, but I would say the beginning chapters and the end chapters were the most interesting, and there were a couple in the middle that got a little lost. But all in all, a great audiobook. I think you have to be okay with a little morbid humor, but if that's something that you can handle, definitely one to check out, and I think will give you a whole new appreciation for cadavers. Next book I listened to was The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit, and this is by Michael Finkel. I loved this book. The audiobook was fantastic. It was only about a 5-hour audiobook, so something that you could really knock out pretty quickly if you listen to it, you know, in the car while you're cooking dinner. You know, it's not a huge investment, but totally worth it. This follows, like it says, the story of the last true hermit, Christopher Knight, and the story starts out, we are following a cop who has finally caught Christopher Knight, and so it just follows from his time being caught until just about the present day. Christopher Knight spent 27 years in the woods without being caught, without purchasing anything. He did sustain himself through stealing, so there's kind of like this questioning of him, and I just love that we talk about gray characters a lot, and I mean, I think that's what people are. We're gray. We're not black. We're not white. You know, we have a lot of things going on in us, and I truly believe that. And so I think that's why when we read about gray characters, we identify so much, because we can see both sides, and we can see good and bad, and we can sympathize with both. And so that's what the author really does, is just gives you Chris. And I fell in love with him. He's not perfect. He did some questionable things, but I still can't help but appreciate who he is and why he was seeking solitude. And yeah, this also gives a little bit of background about like people in solitude, and they're referring to those as hermits a lot of times in this, but just the background of who hermits are throughout history. And so that's kind of cool too. But yeah, just the look at solitude, nature, and just what it means to be alone, especially in a time where we are hardly ever alone. We hardly ever don't have contact with someone. And so to read about this and just gain some wisdom about what it means to be alone and to have solitude in today's world, I just think this is a cool insight onto that. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I will be purchasing myself a copy eventually, because I think I will reread this a couple times in my life. If you're into solitude, if you can be an introvert sometimes, if you love nature, camping, if you kind of like true crime, I think that this could be a book for you. So I loved this. So I hope that you pick it up, and I hope that you will chat about this with me if you do. Next book I read, I had to take back to the library, but it was called Youre Killing Heart by Peggy Pedden. Is that right? By Peggy O'Neill Pedden. I knew it was longer than what I was saying. Sorry. This was a cozy mystery series. It was the first one, just a new release. This follows our protagonist, Campbell Hale. And this series is set in Nashville, Tennessee. There's a lot of country influence, and just Nashville really influences this story. And we're following Campbell, and she has gone with a lawyer friend to pick up some paintings from a very famous singer's wife. And this wife ends up being dead, and so there's a mystery surrounding whodunit. So I loved this. This felt very cozy. It felt very appropriate for fall. It just felt so good. And I think that if you're into cozy mystery series, if you're into country music, or just Nashville, or kind of that, I don't know, that old school country music vibe, that you would really like this one. So, you know, it's nothing crazy spectacular, but if you like cozy mysteries, definitely a fun one to pick out, and I will be picking up the next one in this series. Also, Campbell is a travel agent, and they talk about travel in it all the time, and it's just the coziest thing. So I had to throw that in, but I just love that that is her profession. Last, I read and listened to, and I've kind of been reading and listening to it for a long time. It seems like every time I really get into it, it has to go back to the library because my holds up on my Overdrive app. But anyway, that is The Cruelest Month by Louise Penny. And I was so excited to read this in the spring, but for some reason I just couldn't get through it. But it's now the end of summer, and I finally finished it. Again, I love cozy mysteries. This is cozy mystery with more beautiful writing and more complex characters and more complex mystery. So cozy plus some complexity in this, but this is the third in the series. We're still following Armand Gamache and the town of Three Pines, which is just my absolute dream place. When I listen or read these books, I just get swept away. I want to live there forever and never come back. It just is the most magical place. But I don't want to give too much away. I mean, it's the third in the series, so but each mystery is independent. I mean, I still think it is wise to read them in order just because there is kind of a storyline going throughout them, but I guess the mystery is surrounding a seance and this old home, and so yeah, but I definitely recommend picking up the Armand Gamache series. He's wonderful. Louise Penny's writing is so great, and I read it and I'm like, if it was any other book but this, I might think that it was ridiculously cheesy and just roll my eyes, but there's just something about all of those elements melding together that just makes wonderful, cozy, beautiful mystery, and I love these books. So that is all that I've read. Like I said, some really good ones. I'm really happy with everything. And so yeah, it's been a good reading time for me. What have you picked up recently? Have you found any new favorites, any books that you loved, any good audiobooks? Please chat with me about it in the comments. I hope that you are having a great day, and I hope to talk to you very soon. Bye.